Losing a pregnancy and the grief that you feel in that doesn't end. Whether your pregnancy loss was a year ago, 5 years ago, 45 years ago, your grief is valid, and I'm here to help you understand why. I'm Bianca Johnson, an empowerment coach based in South Africa, and I help pregnancy loss parents throughout the world navigate, transform, and thrive on life's journey. You won't ever hear me say that you have to get over your grief or that you don't deserve to feel any grief. Pregnancy is one of those things that so many people experience, and yet every single experience is completely different. But I know for a fact from my experience that every time I saw those two pink lines, I imagined an entire life within seconds. It had nothing to do with how far along I was or anything like that. The moment I saw the positive test, I imagined a life. I imagined my life, where I would be, how I would look. I imagined what life would be like with this child added to the mix. I imagined all of the various milestones. And to then lose that pregnancy is not only to lose that baby, it is to lose that imagined life for yourself, for that child, for your family. And I want to acknowledge that even if you had children after your losses, and I know particularly for people years ago, that was fairly common. It was, okay, it happens, so just carry on. And then you had your babies and everything was fine. But that loss meant something to you. It was a whole life that you'd imagined. And I want to acknowledge that the children you had after those losses don't negate the grief that you felt then, or possibly even the grief that you feel now. Pregnancy loss and grief are compounding, I find. Grief is one of those things that keeps coming back. It is cyclical. And every time you experience some sort of grief, it compounds all the previous moments of grief that you'd experienced. My husband and I have been watching reels of a guy who's describing the female experience of fertility and the hormone crashes and the pain of childbirth and all these sorts of things, and how women are clearly the stronger sex. But as I approach menopause, I am reminded of how finite the fertility journey is. And there is this reminder that the experience of pregnancy and fertility is entirely unique to every single woman, and yet is also a shared experience. But the thing that I have realized as well is that we often don't acknowledge how much of that experience is dismissed by society. I'm less than 2 weeks out from menopause, and it has brought up a lot of emotions for me. I am very much closing this chapter of my life and moving into a new chapter. And there are parts of me that are excited and looking forward to the roller coaster of this part of my life being done. However, it has been triggering. Perimenopause has been very triggering for me as a pregnancy loss mom, having to check every time I wipe again because my periods are unpredictable. And the emotional, hormonal roller coaster has been quite something, and I'm excited for that to be over. But it also brings up grief, because as women move into menopause, they are leaving behind a part of themselves that has been a major part of their lives, usually more than half of their lives, by the time they get to menopause. there is grief in that, and loss, and acknowledgement of something being over. I think it's important that that is acknowledged and recognized. Particularly for pregnancy loss moms, it can bring up the grief of early pregnancy losses. And I want to acknowledge that today. Grief may have taken a backseat while you were in the part of your life where you were raising children and everything appeared to be going well. But the quiet loneliness of an empty nest, or the realization that your time has come, can bring up a lot of emotions from decades ago. And those are all valid. As I've spoken about my book over the last 10 months, I've had numerous women come to me and talk about how my talking about pregnancy loss and moving forward and the tools that I've used has helped them be able to talk about their pregnancy loss. That was decades ago. One of the key things is that decades ago, very few people were talking about it. And it's wonderful that the internet has given us the opportunity to talk about it more. But a lot of the creators are younger. A lot of the creators are talking about it in the acute phase. And yes, there are people talking about it a few years down the line. But what I want to say is, to those of you who experienced pregnancy loss decades ago, I understand. I understand that you've been carrying it with you and that you pushed it back, and that menopause can trigger a lot of thoughts about those experiences. I am giving you the safe space to talk about those feelings. Whether you would like to chat to me on a transform call, or whether you would like to download my Finding Yourself Again After Pregnancy Loss free series. The free series will give you tools to release that grief, whether it was recent or decades ago. It will give you tools to feel more confident in carrying your grief with you. My transform calls are an hour with me to just share your feelings and feel like you have a compassionate ear listening, helping you find your own personal tools to carry your grief forward. If you're someone who has experienced pregnancy loss, whether recently or decades ago, please subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, please share my channel. I have a goal to grow this channel to 1,000 subscribers before the end of 2026. And we're halfway through August, which gives me very little time to get there. I really would appreciate you sharing and helping me grow this channel so that I can help all of those lost moms who experienced a loss decades ago and were told to just carry on, that their grief is valid, that they no longer need to hide it, and that there are people talking about it. In my book, one of the journaling exercises that I offer is writing a letter to your inner critic. Think about who your inner critic is to you. You can choose to give it a name or a personality. Try and imagine what they look like if they were a real person. What would they wear? What would they drink? What would their movements and carriage be like? Write a letter to your inner critic. Address it to the name you choose for this part of yourself. Acknowledge that the inner critic's role is to do their best to keep you safe and protect you from imagined dangers. Recognize the emotions that it has tried to protect you from. Forgive them for their intrusion. And now you get to say, "Thank you for your opinion. I value it and will take it under advisement." And then politely ask them to sit in the back seat and let you drive. Sign off the letter from your name. Remember, you are entitled to drive your life. I think particularly when we have carried pregnancy loss for a long time, our inner critics tend to get quite loud and tell us that we are not entitled to process those emotions because it's so long ago, and that we should really just move forward and look to the future. But those emotions are part of who I am. That baby literally is part of who we are now. And it's important that we have the opportunity to process those feelings. And sometimes being able to tell our inner critics that we're on the right path and that we are entitled to process feelings that were a long time ago. We don't put a statute of limitations on believing an assault survivor who speaks up 20 years later. So why do we put one on a lost mom's grief? Therapy for abuse survivors processing decades-old trauma is normalized and encouraged. But a lost mom mentioning a miscarriage from 30 years ago gets met with, "Isn't that a long time ago now?" Nobody tells a survivor to just get over it that many years on. Yet that's the exact phrase that lost moms hear. Why do we hold lost moms to a different standard? Trauma is trauma, and we all deserve the opportunity to process the feelings, to process the grief, to grow around it, to find ways for us to move forward in our lives. And so that is what I will be talking about more and more on my channel, that our grief isn't just for right now. It's for the woman who terminated a pregnancy 40 years ago because she was under pressure from the partner's parents. It is for the woman who had a very early miscarriage 60 years ago and never told anyone about it. It is for the person who had a stillbirth and was not allowed to process the grief of losing that baby because there were other children at home and she had to carry on. It is for the person who had a miscarriage 5, 6, 7 years ago, has done the work with their therapist, but still carries parts of that grief with them, unprocessed, unable to move forward fully. As an empowerment coach, I don't want to take away your power or take away your innate knowledge. Empowerment for me is helping you discover the power you have inside of you already. Empowerment for me is helping you learn to use tools that are available in the world to find your own innate inner wisdom. You know what to do. You know how to carry things. I will never ever tell you that you're doing grief wrong. I will never ever tell you that you're not allowed to carry it with you. Those things are just part of being human beings. I'm here to hold you as you feel those emotions, process those emotions, and thrive on life's journey as fully and completely yourself. If you're looking for help to do that, please book a transform call with me. And if you're just starting to give yourself permission to process those emotions, my free email series is available in the comments. I'm Bianca Johnson, and I can't wait to support you. See you next week.